Thank you, Adam. So yes, I don't think there'll be too much overlap between my presentation and Ben's, because I'm going to be focusing on the wiring more than anything. So in terms of the presentation plan, I'll do just a very brief introduction to the Strait of Georgia Coastal Atlas, which was already covered by Ben. And then the two takeaways I hope to leave with the audience is the general approach on how to document this rapidly changing technology, regardless of the specific technologies involved. And secondly, we've put all the recipes online, and we'll provide a link to that. So as an overview, the Strait of Georgia Data Center, which Ben talked about, all of these various tabs, we'll be focusing on this one here. And I think that's enough said about that. The project began in 2014 with a data want survey. We had incredible response. We put out 100 questionnaires, and we received responses from 60. At that time, we were wondering, should we have a website? What should it contain? That sort of thing. And some of those questions were addressed. And also, it provided a sort of a roadmap for us to what things to focus on first. So starting on the left, and we sort of worked our way through. And now we've pretty much covered most of this. And it wasn't a huge survey. It was just using SurveyMonkey, in case people are interested in that. But it did its job. And as our previous speakers have mentioned, our data center is based on the same sort of geospatial data management standards, the ISO 1911XX series, which are about 60 interlinked standards, and the ISO 19115 metadata. And I think both Francesco and Connor on Monday emphasized how important it is to stay with the standards, and I'm 100% behind that, and also the OGC standards. So the net result is that data based on these two sets of standards can be shared around the world with minimal rework. In terms of the architecture of our website, our users are basically anybody, and the data is anything marine, basically. And so it goes into a GeoNetwork, which is sort of the central component of the website, and the GeoServer. And we're agnostic compared regarding open source or commercial products. And so we're more and more using ArcGIS Online for like Ben mentioned, the map catalog there. And the whole system is based on, depending on how the data comes in, sometimes it's PDF reports or spreadsheets, like Leonardo mentioned. We use a PostGIS database, and folders for other things. So the net result is people access the data through the Marine Data BC portal, or make your own map, or the map catalog. So let's look at how to document and maintain information technology in a rapidly changing environment. For instance, GeoNetwork and GeoServer have annual or more frequent releases. It's similarly for the database program that we use. Security has emerged recently. The demands are changing, and even the underlying technology utilized by GeoNetwork changes, such as the recent adoption of Elasticsearch, which is required to make GeoNetwork work now. And in the past year, we've been focusing on digital object identifiers, which researchers want to reference their data source, things like that. So it's changing all the time. Adam mentioned the ICAN Cookbooks, and the reason why you might want cookbooks is key contributors move on, relevant information becomes dated, there's too much information for anyone to remember, and there's a continuing need for training. So originally there were 4 cookbooks, mostly focused on the what. And so we took that concept and generalized it, focused on the how-to part of it. And more specifically, I was somewhat familiar with the ISO 9000 format. And the big thing about that is you can develop little modular processes that you can link together and make an overall product. So it's very similar to real cookbooks with recipes, and lake cookbooks. It can be different recipes for the same goal. And existing recipes should be regarded as the best documentation so far. So I'm going to run through the ISO 9000 format very briefly. It's about 5 steps to the master document list. There's processes and process levels, a plan, do, check, act, mantra, problem tracking, resolution, and auditing. I'm not going to have time to go through these 2 aspects in any detail. And a key pillar of the ISO 9000 format is continuous improvement. So the corollary is that you don't have to get the documentation perfect first time. It's easy to evolve, but it does need to do the stated task. And let's see. So the ISO system was basically developed to be a paper-based and traceable, but instead, for sort of practical reasons, we've just used a file system and no paper. So we're not really ISO 9000 compliant at all, but a lot of the approach is along those lines. The master document list, for instance, became the traditional just directory listings. And as a consequence of that, in contrast to the ISO system, we lose version control. There are 4 levels of documentation in ISO, but the 3 that are important are level 2, which is an overview, level 3 processes, and level 4 forums. So in the level 2, what we have is basically a container or folder of the level 3 and level 4 processes and forums. And we've assigned just some arbitrary 3-digit numbers to it. So it'd be something like 320. I'll show you some examples towards the end. The level 3 processes are the recipes, and it's got a number, 3-digit number, and a 2-digit specific process description. Sort of like a verse in a chapter. So it looks like that. And alternatively, in the same container, you might have forms, which might be existing manuals or, I don't know, GeoNetwork or anything like that. There can be reference documents, actual forms or checklists. If something's going to be done repeatedly, you might want to have a checklist and lists of items. So the anatomy of a level 3 process is plan, do, check, act. So you decide what you want to achieve. You document how to do. You list the steps to do it. At the end, you check that what you get at the output is what you wanted, and if not, then you act to correct that, to find out what's wrong. So more on the process steps. This is sort of what a typical form might look like. it's got a header and a footer. Here we've badged it with ICAN, a little title, and then the process number, that level 3 number I mentioned. You have steps down the side, just a numerical list, and exactly how to do it. So you do these steps and you should get the desired result. And over in this column is references, forms, and details, which can variously expand what's going on here, can reference a level 4 document, and can provide what you should see as a result of doing these steps. It's sort of up to you. In the footer, you have a basically who put it in, and there should be a sort of a single point of control here with a date, because the documentation's, things go out of date. And then just a page number. So, and then in terms of the conformist or tech act part of it, you explicitly have a place somewhere where you have a check. And here's a thing where it was a Jetty test, try to start the demos, and then feedback should describe blah, 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 blah. So if it doesn't, if you're not getting what you're supposed to hear, then you loop back and correct it. And since you're doing this in on a module by module basis, you don't sort of get at the end and then wonder where you're going wrong. And for me, it's sort of my hard experience is that oftentimes you get things wrong, and you have to sort of redo things. So I mentioned that there's 2 big parts to the ISO 9000 program that are under consideration for implementation, but we haven't really done it yet. And one is the problem reporting for continuous improvement. If there's something wrong, then anyone can sort of flag it and sort of tell you about it. And there's sort of a warning type thing, as well as a non-conformance response, where you almost down tools. And the other one is the regular annual or biannual audit, which is how you make changes. So this is how it looks. If you go to our website, which is in the next slide. So I put a bunch of stuff in here. We put some meta software in here that's not really ISO-like, but it's got a nice metadata editor in there called JNAP. Ben mentioned we're on the UBC website, but so you got basic installations through here. And then down towards the end here, I put in a grab bag of metadata data handling best practices and data handling best practices. This basically is a lot of SQL type stuff, database stuff, and this is just things I've encountered. So you don't have to follow it all the way through, but if you're implementing a website, you sort of more or less start at the top and work your way down. So it's just like a recipe book. So this is the last slide. The drafts processes were developed through the Pacific Salmon Foundation and are freely available at the GitHub location, ICAN Tech, ICAN Cookbooks, or you can put in just, if you're doing a Google search, you can just do ICAN Tech and then cook space books, and you'll end up at the same site. And this may be useful to others who are developing coastal atlases. Main focus is open source. Documents are in docx format. I would like to get to the markdown approach that, Adam's got one document in there that's contributed that way. And I would like that. And we welcome additions, other processes, testing and editing. This is a sample of what you'd see in 344, which is Digital Object Identifiers. That's, so you've got a number of level 3 processes here, and then you can see the forms have a couple of forms that are ones are stuff picked up maybe off the web or whatever. And so that's it. I'm sort of available for questions.
Super. Thank you, Terry. We've just gone maybe a couple of minutes over time. If anybody has one quick question for Terry, then maybe we can take it now. Otherwise, maybe please contact him over the chat or by email. I'm just thinking over some of what we've talked about through the session, and thinking about Pierre Luigi's comment around connecting back into IODE and IOC. Working with Terry on the ICAN cookbooks was the first time I encountered these ISO process documents, and since then ISO 9000 has become the bedrock of the data management, quality management framework for national oceanographic data centers and associated data units under IODE. And some of the experience that I had from working on these with Terry was useful when we were going through the accreditation process there from our data center here in Ireland. So that was, yeah, it was great to see that presentation, Terry. And I think maybe something that we can do as a community is to maybe take some of those cookbooks and maybe review them, and then see how we can connect them back into ocean best practices as well. So it's been a great session to go through some of the technology developments, some of the crowdsourcing, and some of the links to other projects of